And thanks everybody for joining us today. So yeah, as mentioned, we're going to talk about some of the key benefits and reasons why you guys should consider cloud email security as part of your product stack. So we're going to talk about things like what an on-premise email security solution offers. I know a majority of the people that are attending this webinar have an on-premise appliance today that you're using to protect your email or customer's email, or perhaps maybe you guys work in some sort of a hybrid environment. So I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes or so talking about some of the many benefits of cloud email security, as well as some options that are available to you guys if you do decide to make the transition to the cloud. So first, let's start by looking at some of the different security options that are available in the market today. So there's a lot of different ways that you guys can provide email security to your customers, but they tend to fall into one of these three main buckets that we see here. They're either an on-premise solution, a cloud solution, or a hybrid of the two. So when it comes to things like on-prem email security, with this kind of solution, you guys are actually choosing to invest in the infrastructure. Typically, that's going to be an appliance, and there's usually some sort of upfront cost to purchase the hardware. There's then also the added need to have to maintain specialized staff to be able to go ahead and manage the actual hardware itself and service the appliance as it begins to age. From the cloud side, that's going to be based more on a SaaS-based model. So the email security itself is actually going to be hosted in someone else's data center. So that means that your staff doesn't have to manage the hardware. There's nothing to go on site at customer sites to install. There's nothing to maintain long-term. So with a cloud-hosted solution, you're actually getting access to the kind of high availability you would only get if you had multiple appliances deployed out at customer sites. Cloud services are also subscription-based, so it makes it pretty easy to predict your budget and expenses ahead of time. And then a lot of organizations that we talked to today have actually chosen to go a hybrid of these two environments. So there may be several reasons for something like this. It could be things like corporate preference. There may be compliance that's dictating that some kind of on-premises device has to exist, regulations, or maybe it's just a large company you guys are supporting that has different kinds of budgetary options. So a lot of the time, organizations choose to go with hybrid so they can actually supplement the existing on-premise device with some of the more advanced features that cloud security solutions provide, and add additional layers of security onto that base layer. And we'll talk a little bit more about that moving forward. So there's a number of different benefits when it comes to providing an on-premise based email security solution. First is you get to choose how, when, where that solution is deployed, and you get to maintain physical direct access to the device. So there's something about having that, tangible machine that you can go to and touch and make changes to and things like that. So it gives you guys complete control over the solution. Also, you own the hardware. It's yours, so you can do with it as you'd like. You can bring it anywhere, deploy it however you'd like. And then your in-house staff is able to react to issues right away. So again, kind of having that tangible thing that you can touch. Your specialized staff is in-house, and your IT department is in full control of the email security solution. There's no, other vendor or anything like that that's holding the security device. It's yours. So any issues that require policy or configuration change, those can be acted upon immediately. And then there's also low long-term running costs. So after you've made that initial investment into the infrastructure, it's a one-off hardware cost. And then there's going to be longer term costs that are much lower the longer that you guys actually own the device. And then there's a lot of customizations available from within the solution. So owning it outright, again, gives you guys full control over all the settings and configurations. So there's a number of common beliefs that we hear among people that are using on-prem solutions. So it tends to be they feel that the security is more reliable if it's hosted locally, since it's something that they can, physically touch. They physically have their hands on the device. I've also heard that they feel that if you have an on-prem exchange, then it can only be protected by an on-prem security solution. Um, that they need to actually access the physical hardware in order to be able to offer efficient security. Or maybe the on-prem security has never given them any problems, so why would there be any need to move to anything else in the cloud? And then there's those people that I talk to that believe that they have to have an on-prem solution in order to stay compliant. So maybe, auditors or regulators are saying they wouldn't be okay with a cloud solution. And while some of these beliefs might have some ground, we've actually found that most of these ideas are common misconceptions or common misunderstandings of what cloud security solutions actually offer organizations in terms of security and compliance and advanced features and ease of use and things like that. So before we dive into the actual benefits of a cloud solution, let's see what's driving the adoption of cloud solutions. So the number one driver that we're seeing today is the number of businesses that are migrating to Office 365. So most organizations begin their journey to the cloud by making the Office 365 migration. It's far and away the cloud solution that we see most people starting with, and it's often the first steps into any kind of cloud platform. So today we're seeing 61% of organizations are already using Office 365, and that number is still growing as people continue to shift off of on-prem Exchange. As organizations continue to move to Office 365, that's when we find that they start to reevaluate their security needs. And that's actually a perfect time for providers like you guys to be able to consider alternatives, propose alternatives to an on-prem security that's been in place for years. Another common misconception I hear is about Microsoft. So while they do provide some email security as part of their Office 365, we're getting a lot of feedback that not all of the security needs are being met by that kind of solution. So there's a lot of organizations that choose to supplement their native Microsoft security with some kind of third-party cloud hosted to try to make the end users even more secure. And not surprisingly, with the rapid rate of email adoption or cloud email adoption that we're seeing, the amount of spend within cloud security solutions is growing proportionately. So this means that companies that are offering cloud-based email security tend to be more innovative, and they tend to be able to offer more security to end users from the growing and new kinds of risks that we see forming every day. So I definitely expect to see email security space get even more competitive and more innovative with different technologies and things like that to address the ever evolving threats from the cyber criminals that are out there. So all of this innovation is just one of the added benefits for any company that's looking to switch to cloud-based email security. Um, there's no longer a need to make sure that your solution is up to date, you're on the most recent firmware. That's all handled by cloud providers. So that's one of the reasons why we're seeing this rapid rate of adoption. And then one of the other things we're seeing is over the past few years has actually become sort of a scarcity of technical specialists out there for hire. So you guys may have even run into this yourselves with your own businesses trying to find employees to work for your companies. But currently there's about 200,000 open tech related jobs globally. So that's a lot of positions to be filled. With hardware becoming something, fewer and fewer MSPs want their specialized staff spending time on managing. This allows you to free up those staff to take advantage of some more important things that they can do nowadays. There's also additional expenses with hiring, so as well as training and maintaining that staff. But with cloud security solutions, a lot of those things are actually outsourced to the vendors themselves. Again, freeing up some time for your IT staff to spend more time on business drivers for your company. So what are some of the benefits of a cloud solution? So let's say that you guys want to start exploring cloud-based solutions. What are some of the things that you can expect? So the first is faster deployment and system updates. We hear that a lot of organizations worry about the actual migration to the cloud, and a big concern is how long is it going to take to fully migrate to a cloud solution? Also of concern is how much trouble is it going to be? Is it going to be disruptive? If you make any cutovers, is the customer going to lose any email? Email is obviously a huge business tool. So you want to make sure that your customers are able to stay communicating via email while you guys are still offering them the highest level of security that you can. Contrary to the belief that it may be difficult or timely, cloud solutions actually have a faster deployment time than most people would expect. So I know personally here at Barracuda, we've made it very quick and simple for you guys to be able to migrate your customers from any kind of on-prem appliance to the cloud. And then after migration, it reduces having to worry about physical hardware or making sure that database and things like that are up to date to be able to protect against immediate threats. That's all handled on the back end by the cloud provider. So it's one less thing to worry about. So when it comes to actually migrating from a Barracuda appliance to a cloud security solution, there's really two simple steps that we go through with our customers. So the first is you guys would just reach out to Barracuda. We'll schedule a simple migration request call. And on this call, we'll go over everything you guys can expect during the process so that there's no question marks, any questions you get from your customer around time frame or outages or anything like that. We'll make sure that all of that is covered there. And then at that point, Barracuda will go ahead and begin to transfer all of the current configurations from the on-prem device to the new cloud solution. So really at that point, once that step is done, step two, you guys just need to finalize the migration by cutting over the MX records and pointing the traffic to the cloud solution instead. This last step, depending on DNS, should take place in less than an hour, and there's going to be no lapse in the customer's security. So there's no point in the process where your customer's left without any kind of security, so they don't have to worry about during the migration that mail drops or any kind of threats are getting through. It all happens seamlessly in the background for them. So the second benefit that you can expect is that you're able to refocus your IT staff. So we talked a little bit earlier that IT resources are at premium. So imagine if you were able to actually free up some of their time to focus on other tasks. There's really no maintenance for your IT team with a cloud solution. There's no hardware. Even though your team will still be managing the solution, there's very little time required to keep your customers' email flowing while still ensuring that they're secure. So freeing up your staff is going to allow them to focus on more strategic tasks for your business. For example, maybe they guys want to make a push towards user training or education. We know how important those things have become, and there's usually not enough time or resources available within organizations to spend any kind of substantial time training or educating employees or customers. Also, it allows the staff to be able to maybe take some more time proactive threat hunting. So we know that no security solution is 100% effective 100% of the time. So it makes your IT staff available to be able to proactively look for threats and answer customer requests faster. Or maybe they can focus on performing things that bring in direct revenue for you. I'm sure you guys have other things that you'd love your staff to be able to spend time on rather than managing hardware. So the third benefit of cloud solutions that we see is the absence of any kind of hidden cost. So there's no need to invest in the infrastructure to begin with. All you're going to have is a predictable monthly payment, and this should be negotiated at the beginning of any kind of contract. So it's going to allow you and your customers to budget well ahead of time. You guys are going to know exactly what the month-to-month payment is, and then there's no added fees from there. So if there's any kind of small businesses, this is a huge benefit when it comes to these kinds of things. Small businesses or startups, we find, definitely need to have some kind of visibility into their cost plan so they can plan for the future. So that makes SaaS subscriptions a huge win for them. Another benefit of cloud solutions is they're extremely scalable. So if you think about it, people are starting to send more and more emails every day. We're sending emails to our partners, our vendors, our customers, our colleagues. There's about 281 billion business related email messages that are sent every single day. And that number is expected to grow by 19% by the end of next year. So we're going to be sending more email than we ever have. So that means that your email security solution needs to be able to process more email, and it needs to do so in a secure and timely manner. So as our organizations start to change, as communication patterns change, your email security solution needs to be able to adapt to these changes quickly. Cloud-based solutions are a lot more agile in terms of adapting to these kinds of changes since it's all managed on the back end by the vendor. So the amount of investment that goes into these solutions, as well as the ease at which vendors can update and scale them, is amazing. It just a lot more scalable. So as we start adding more people, more emails, you don't have to worry about maybe upgrading a device, upgrading a plan. That's all just handled by the cloud solution. So again, as your business is growing, you're adding more users. As you add more users, you're starting to send and receive more email, and this has an exponential effect. So I know personally it's taking me longer and longer every morning to get through my emails, and I'm sure it's the same for you guys. So to make sure that I'm secure, I need to guarantee that all of these emails are being scanned, but I don't want to, I can't, wait for these important emails to get through a filter. I need them in my inbox immediately. So you guys may have fast changing business needs as well. Maybe you're going through a cloud migration, or you have a company that's hired a whole bunch of employees. Maybe there's some kind of acquisition that's been made. For whatever reason, there's now a whole lot more users that we need to manage and secure from an email perspective than maybe the on-prem device was originally spec'd for. So cloud solutions allow you much more easily to scale out in this kind of scenario than an on-prem solution would. You won't have to buy a new device. You don't have to scale it up. You just add a couple of seats, and the backend service scales with the amount of users, and it scales with performance. So I'd say the last key benefit of a cloud-based solution, and it might arguably be the most important, is that cloud email security is able to offer more advanced detection techniques. So for example, with Barracuda's hosted email security service, you automatically have access to features like advanced threat protection. It's designed specifically to prevent against zero-day attacks, zero-day threats, so things like malicious URLs, ransomware, malware. And these are real enhancements and real innovation that's happening that you get available with different cloud email security solutions. I'll touch a little bit more on that. And then the second point that we want to cover is the security that's available just beyond any kind of gateway. So first, let's take a look at how something like advanced threat protection can help keep your organization more secure. So one of the types of attacks that I'm sure everyone's aware of now is what we call zero-day or zero-hour attacks. For anyone that's not aware, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, I'll kind of walk through what a zero-day attack is and how it works, and why some appliance or gateway solutions might not be able to help protect against these kinds of attacks. So typically, a hacker is able to go out and they're able to find some kind of vulnerability. This could be a hardware vulnerability. They could be some kind of malware that they've developed, and they're going to go ahead and exploit and leverage that vulnerability to start sending links or files that contain malicious content or malicious malware into an organization. So the attack is launched at that point. It usually takes time for a vendor to be able to become aware that this type of attack is happening. So let's imagine it's a new type of attack that's never been seen before. There's no existing signatures on those files. That link doesn't have any kind of signatures against it. So the tool that's scanning isn't able to detect, identify, or block that attack because it's simply not aware of that attack. So then the vendor becomes aware of it. They start to build in those signatures. They distribute them across the solution. And then anyone that's receiving the threat from that point forward is protected from that threat. So the time between when that attack is launched and the time between when signatures are installed is the zero-day attack. So that's where there's no protection against those. So Barracuda actually offers advanced threat protection built into the cloud email solution that's designed to stop these zero-day threats in their tracks. So this is an example of a common type of malicious email that we would see. Um, you have what looks to be an email from Microsoft, which is pretty common these days. Maybe somebody sent an email that looks like something that's coming from your colleague. Either way, you get this file, you open the file, and then there's a number of markers that will install malware or ransomware on the machine. So the hackers are usually using impersonation tactics. So in this case, they're going to impersonate Office 365 or Microsoft. If you click the link, then you'll go ahead and most likely get some kind of malware in this scenario. So that's where something like advanced threat protection comes in. So you need technologies that are sandboxing, and you need to be able to take this type of file and open it in a safe environment and see how it behaves. So if it behaves in any kind of malicious way, then it's blocked. That file never hits the user's inbox. So all of these things need to be happening in real time, right? It's important to be able to block these messages before these files are delivered to the end user. So a lot of times an on-prem appliance doesn't have this technology built into it. Many organizations choose to buy additional levels of security that'll help protect against zero-day attacks. So zero-day attacks are one of the main tactics that are used by attackers, and it's probably the main way that people get ransomware into an environment, and that can end up being pretty crippling. So it's nice that it's built into cloud solutions. So what we're talking about here is you really need to have a multi-layered intelligent email security that provides protection not just at the gateway level, but beyond that gateway as well. So I'd like to spend the next portion of this webinar talking about some of those types of solutions. So advanced threat protection is one of several key features that are only available with cloud-based email security solutions. These innovative advanced protection techniques are one of the reasons why a gateway may not be enough. So if you think about how we're protecting our corporate inboxes today, there's a gateway solution that may have a number of filters built into it. It looks at things like the reputation of the sender, the email address, the IP address. Maybe it's filtering through content and looking at different kinds of malicious intent or malicious URLs, for example. Or it'll go through and it'll apply some kind of advanced threat protection, like the example we just talked about, in regards to sandboxing, to be able to go ahead and detect these zero-day threats, these new pieces of malicious attachment. And then a lot of the time, this is usually enough to stop a vast majority of the attacks that we see, and it does a really good job at blocking those types of threats. But we found that people have realized that there's security gaps in this kind of solution, and they've actually come up with ways to create social engineering attacks that we call spear phishing. So they design these emails in such a way that they're actually able to bypass these filters, bypass policies that are set up on the gateway. And the emails that they're sending through usually come from some kind of high reputation sender. So it's an email address that's never been used with malicious intent before, and therefore, it's not setting off any kind of red flags with a gateway. Or maybe they have links within messages that have never been used maliciously before. They don't carry any kind of malware. There might be some kind of form behind the URL that's asking the user to fill out information. There's a lot of different types of attacks that they send through. But other than that, when looking for malicious activity, it appears to be pretty legitimate. So there's no kind of malicious payload. There's no bad attachment to the gateway. These messages appear to be perfectly safe. And then there's the social engineering tactics that are used to trick emails into responding to emails, clicking on links, giving up credentials. It's these kinds of attacks that are very difficult, if not impossible, to stop with just a gateway solution alone, whether it's an appliance or a cloud. So we can take an example at a spear phishing attack. So here's an example of a common spear phishing attack that we see. And this is actually a real life example that we found recently. And it's pretty common to the types of examples that we see out there. So just like earlier, we get an email from Microsoft. This is by far the most commonly impersonated brand that we run into. Take note, there's no malicious attachment. All it's asking the user to do is follow the link to review your recent activity. And then you follow the link, you click to the page, and it brings us to what looks exactly like a Microsoft login page. So the trick with this page is that it's actually hosted on a high reputation site that was hacked by the hacker. So the URL protection won't do anything. There's nothing malicious about the link because it's never been used for anything malicious in the past. But there are some signs that tell you that this could be malicious. So for example, it's an unusual email address that this was sent from. It's an unusual looking landing page. Microsoft doesn't usually send these kinds of messages from this email address to this landing page. Microsoft doesn't usually ask you to log into your account on the specific URL with this specific landing page, but it's really difficult to build filters or policies to detect those little nuances in email. It's not something that gateways or filters can get into. So that's why you need something more intelligent, a more intelligent type solution that's actually context aware and typically AI driven. So it's able to go ahead and detect these anomalies and unusual requests. So it would see that, this isn't the address Microsoft usually uses. It would see that this isn't Microsoft's typical login page. And that's all based on historical data from previous communications within the organization. So something that can use this information to be able to determine what's outside of people's typical behavior via email. So another common threat that we see that goes beyond the gateway protection is business email compromise. So this is an example of a business email compromise that you get an email from usually a senior executive. In this case, it happens to be the CEO. So this email on its own doesn't really look malicious. It's just saying, hey, Michael, are you in the office? I need you to do something for me. But if you dive into it, you start to see little signs. So if you look closely, there's actually a misspelling in the sender's address. So it's somebody that's trying to impersonate the domain to pretend to be Jane in this scenario. And then there's always a sense of urgency that we find with business email compromise. So we did the research, taking a look at thousands of different business email compromise attacks, and almost all of them had some sense of urgency built into it. It's always something like, I need this done right away. In this example here, it's I need this done quickly. So it's one of those social engineering tactics that people have found very successful to get a response from users before they have any kind of time to think about what's actually being requested. People are used to following orders. People don't really want to question the sort of authority figures, especially the CEO of the company. So if they're not thinking about it and they just need this reply quickly, it stops people from actually thinking it through a little bit. So when you get an urgent request from your boss, you usually want to act quickly, right? So even without spending enough time to evaluate that request, and then finally, this is how a lot of wire transfers happen. In this case, it was unusual for the employee, for the CEO to ask for any kind of bank transfer. So if the person that receiving it actually thought about it very quickly, they may not have time. It's very difficult. It's very impossible to build rules and policies within a gateway that would be able to detect all these little nuances within email. And that's why gateways don't stop every email threat that your business is seeing. But there are some solutions that you can put in place. DMARC is a common one, for example. So that allows you to go ahead, put it in your DNS, and the goal is that it's going to prevent people from impersonating your domain, kind of like this. It'll allow you to go out and block any different spoofing attacks, name spoofing detection, and it's something that that everyone has access to. And then it's also important to have visibility into historical, including internal email communication, to be able to understand what's normal and what's not normal behavior for your employees in terms of email behavior. So if there's no visibility into the history of the communication, the solution in place won't be able to tell you that this may be some kind of unusual request with a weird sense of urgency, with a spoofed domain, and it's an attack that a gateway probably won't stop. So if you want to consider a cloud email security solution, you probably want to free up some IT resources. You might be part of a fast-growing business that's going through a lot of changes. Maybe you're due for an upgrade on your appliance and you want to consider options before purchasing a new piece of hardware, or maybe you just need better protection than you're getting today. There's a lot of reasons why people are considering moving to cloud or have moved to cloud email security solutions. So these are just some of the reasons that we've seen. So really, just like we started out, there's three main options here, right? So you've evaluated your needs in email security, and you've decided that the on-prem device does enough, and you guys decide to stay. Maybe it's not the right time to move on it. Maybe it's time to start evaluating other needs, but the solution that you have provides enough security for you. Then there's the people we found that maybe there's some customers that have been hit by some of these newborn types of threats and have realized it's time to move to cloud security, to start taking advantage of some of these features not currently available with their on-prem device. And we certainly see a lot of customers that are choosing to go with the hybrid model. So maybe they want to supplement the existing gateway with some of these more advanced social engineering techniques or AI techniques to go ahead and keep their users secure from multiple different levels. And that's really what we at Barracuda here believe in as well, is a multi-layered email protection. Um, so there's the base, right? So at the base level, you still have to have a gateway defense, and that's really important. So you have to make sure that all of your inbound and your outbound email is secure. You need to make sure that encryption is available, or DLP, especially when there's certain compliances that dictate it. And then there's a lot of organizations that need to make sure that their email is archived for compliance for e-discovery respects. And then those are kind of the basic pillars, and all of those, of course, can also be delivered through the cloud. And then there's a layer that we call resiliency. So sometimes mistakes happen or attacks get through, and you want to make sure that you're able to back up the data that lives within the cloud as well. So what if one of your employees accidentally deletes an important file, or what if maybe you guys have been unfortunate enough to be struck by ransomware and it goes through and it starts encrypting maybe OneDrive files. So that's where something like a cloud backup solution comes into play, and it does a really good job at securing your data and helping make sure that you guys can restore data that may have otherwise been lost. And then in terms of resiliency, email continuity is going to go ahead and make your business more resilient at the point of downtime. So even if your email system itself is down, you want to make sure that you're able to fall back and keep business running via email while you're getting that system back up and running. You want to make sure that people are able to continue to send and receive business critical emails. And then next is what we call the inbox defense. So this is where that protection beyond the gateway starts to come in. So you need to make sure that there's a dedicated solution in place to protect against those social engineering attacks. You need it to sit beyond the gateway, more on the inbox level. So think about something that integrates directly with your inbox and is able to see internal as well as historical email communications. That way it's able to more successfully go out and start to build these behavioral profiles. And it's able to determine how people within the organization typically communicate. And this is going to be unique from company to company. So it's really important that it's trained on your customer's environment. And then based on the data, it's going to use machine learning to be able to go ahead and detect these abnormal communication attacks, which is a clear sign of spear phishing. A lot of attacks that we see aim to steal accounts. So usually they want to steal login details and get access to somebody's Office 365 environment or bank environment. And ultimately they use these credentials to hijack business conversations and either change things like bank or routing numbers, or go through and spread malware within an organization. And then DMARC reporting is becoming very important to prevent your brand from being compromised or your domain from being spoofed. And then don't forget about the end users through all of this. So it's really important that we make sure that there's these tools in place to protect them, but maybe more important is to make sure that there's security awareness training programs so that users are being trained on what threats to look for. So like we mentioned earlier, even with all of this protection, no solution is 100% of the time. So there's technologies and things like that that are available to help assist you guys with training users. So things like phishing simulations, videos, collateral, things like that. And maybe not surprisingly, Barracuda actually offers a stack that is built upon this total email protection. So at Barracuda, we've built this total email protection that reflects this same kind of approach that we just talked about. First, we have our gateway defense, there's the resiliency. All of that is offered through what we call Barracuda Essentials, and that's a cloud-based email solution. Our inbox defense is delivered through what we call Barracuda Sentinel, and this is an AI engine that specifically uses Microsoft Office 365 APIs to integrate directly with the user's mailbox, and it gives visibility into those attacks that go beyond the gateway. And then lastly, there's Barracuda Managed Fish Line, which offers security awareness training that's offered to all the end users. So any questions, you guys can submit those via the Q&A or chat portion. And if you guys would just take a minute to fill out this survey that Sarah mentioned, it'll help us definitely refine some of the content that we have in these webinars in the future. I have to imagine someone has a question, right? So one of the questions is, what are the main differences between this and Microsoft Advanced Threat Protection? So they both have the same name. In Barracuda terms, it's specifically looking for those zero-day attacks. So any attachment that comes in that we don't have the file signature for, that's where it sends it up to the Barracuda Cloud Sandbox. And we'll go ahead and open that attachment to try to detect any kind of malicious activity. Barracuda's advanced threat protection is actually more than just email based though. So it's actually shared across things like our firewall and our web filters. So anytime a zero-day threat comes into any one of those vectors, it'll instantly update advanced threat protection across the Barracuda suite to make sure that that threat doesn't get through. So originally, if it came through via email, and then somebody tries to download it through, the firewall, even though the AV may not have a signature on it, we've created our own signature based on having passed that email through ATP from the email side. You bet. I appreciate the question. So we can hang out for a couple more minutes and see if anything else comes through. Feel free to use the Q&A, guys, if you guys want any more detail on anything. So I got a question. Could you give a brief review of a real world threat that you saw with the Office 365 unusual activity email? Sure. So we touched on a couple of them. The two most common that we see are employee impersonation or service impersonation. So service being things like Office 365, DHL. So they come in a couple different flavors. The one that we looked at was the CEO impersonation. So an email comes through. It looks like it's coming from the CEO and it's saying, hey, I need this request. Can you quickly reply? So AI is able to look and see, this isn't the type of request this person makes. Maybe it's not the email address this person actually sends from. And that one almost always ends with iTunes gift cards. I don't know how those are still successful, but those still work. The others we see are usually the service impersonations are trying to get somebody to click on a link. So common ones that we see are there was an issue with your bank account. Click this link to log in and verify your information and reclaim it. So I've actually gotten that one personally to my inbox before. So an AI threat would have, or an AI solution would have gone ahead and said, you know what, this company never sends from this address. This company never sends this type of link. This is common in types of threats that we see. So I'd say the two most common that we see are service and employee impersonation. Does fish line training include email campaigns that are sent to employees? Yep. So that's actually what it is. So with Barracuda MSP, we offer what we call managed fish line. So it's actually a fully managed service by Barracuda. The idea is that we're going to create all of the materials, we're going to create all of the campaigns, and then once a quarter, It's broken into quarterly campaigns, and a user gets one email per month. The first month of the quarter, they get training. It's based on some kind of industry relevant topic. And then month two, we send out simulated phishing attacks to all of the users. If they click on links or they download something or they enter credentials, they're immediately brought to a landing page that tells them that they were tricked and things to look for in the future. And then we generate reports every month that we send to you guys. So you can see who's taking the training, which users have failed the campaigns, things like that. Awesome. Well, no more questions coming in. So thank you guys. I appreciate you joining today. And if any questions come up, please feel free to reach out, and we can always get you set up with product demos or talk a little bit deeper into questions that you guys have. So feel free to reach out to our sales team and they'll get you in touch with the right contacts. So thank you again, everybody, for joining. Stay safe and talk to you next time.